Did you know there were about 71 million deaths in World War II? That is undoubtedly a lot of dead people. In the Soviet Union alone, there were about 20 million deaths, most of which happened at the hand of Joseph Stalin, due to Stalin's political paranoia and brutal dictatorship. To many people, this seemed to be one of the worst acts a dictator could commit. But before forming your opinion, you have to look at the other side of the story. Russia was far behind in societal, technological, and military advancement, and Stalin knew his acts of enslaving the Russian population to rapid industrialization and the completion of several five-year plans. This led to Russia's success and defeat of Germany, which ended the war. It would be hard to judge if it was all worth it, balancing the lives of millions for the death of a major threat. But one thing is certain, Stalin's dictatorship had a very positive effect on the war, but also a very negative effect on Russian life. When Stalin was born, his name was a mouthful, and I will attempt to pronounce it. Iosif Vissarionovich Jugashvili. And throughout his childhood he had many nicknames, but most historians prefer to refer to him as Young Stalin. Joseph Stalin's childhood was rough. He had an abusive father who was an alcoholic, but young Stalin was also a focused and successful scholar. Joseph Stalin as a young man was much different than how he was in World War II. He had many of what the Russian government at the time defined as revolutionary tendencies. He spent a lot of time in prison for organizing protests and other revolutionary activities, but the jail time only made him more eager to rebel. Much later in his life, as a new adult, Joseph Stalin met and joined the Bolsheviks, a political party that was interested in taking power and had the famous political figure Vladimir Lenin. After the Russian Revolution, Lenin was put in power and Stalin was ascending towards Lenin's position. Lenin feared Stalin's quick climb of the political statuses and was about to remove him from office, but died before he could do so. When Stalin was dictator, he was focusing first on restoring Russia after the revolution, and once it was, he focused on industrializing the country to catch up with other major world powers. The Russian government invested in coal, steel, iron, and other essential and profitable materials. He had gained an immense amount of power, but the question was what to do with it. Stalin's brutal form of governing was, and is still well known around the globe. After he rapidly and with great determination ascended the ranks of the Bolshevik government, he was not at all willing to give up his power. He was so paranoid that he conducted purges within the civilian population and governmental community. A purge was a mass murder of anyone who was even the slightest threat to his position. By the end, millions of civilians were killed and hundreds of well-performing political figures were too. In his rapid industrialization of Russia, to keep up with foreign standards, he put just about all of Russia to work, whether it was in factories or labor camps, so their country could grow strong in the mining and investment of essential materials. In advancing the technology Russia had, he would set goals. He would look at a group's progress and performance and set a goal that, for the group to achieve it, the group workers had to work harder than before. If a group did not achieve the goal Stalin and/or his colleagues set for them, the project's director was killed and replaced with a more qualified director. Stalin's management style could be very well described with the phrase bloody business. Stalin also cut off all private work and business and directed it to the government. Everything was brought under the banner of the USSR. The largest, most famous example of this is when the communist government completely seized private farming. Farmers' crops, livestock, land, and other farm property was taken by the communist government, and the farmers were forced to work for the government. This resulted in a huge revolution that failed, where the farmers ended up destroying half of the USSR's crops. While this was going on, many civilians were toiling away in factories and mines. Smoke covered the skies of many cities, covering the bodies on the ground. These acts were in no way beneficial to life in Russia. After the USSR had grown so much from its hard push for progress and industrialization, It was ready to jump into the skirmish of World War II. It was up there, a potential threat to other imperial powers, and it was looking to expand. It wasn't long before Russia had crossed roads with Germany. They had both gained influence in Poland and agreed to split the ownership of the country. Stalin had received possession of the eastern half, and Hitler got the western half. This deal was surrounding the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939. It was a truce between the two countries which didn't follow through. The feud between the two countries is centered on the German invasion of Russia. The USSR fought the devastating German blitzkrieg in battles of Kursk and Stalingrad and drove them out of the Russian borders. This was actually beneficial for most other countries in the war. Russia had experience fighting Germany, and that made Germany focus on Russia as another primary target in World War II, focusing less on other enemies to Germany. This feud had given for other countries time to prepare for the main battle, and Germany was lining up in their sights. This improved the progress of the war. The final battle, the most beneficial of all, was the takedown of the German forces. The US, UK, and USSR worked non-stop in defeating Germany. Russia had worked the most, weakening their forces before the battle and brutally killing the German soldiers by the side of the other countries. It would have been much more difficult without Russia. Without the USSR, the battle might have failed. This collaboration of forces only did good, other than any civilian casualties, and effectively ended the war. In the end, Stalin's dictatorship in Russia was extremely beneficial to the state of the war, but it also destroyed life in Russia. Millions were sacrificed to exterminate one major threat to other prosperous civilizations. There could be many arguments to whether it was worth it or not, but right now we mourn the fallen citizens and commemorate the end of the abusive German power. It was easy to see how Stalin went about this. Everything he did as dictator was aggressive and strong. He forcefully shaped Russia into his own weapon, which he used to club the Nazi Empire that betrayed him.